Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and welcome once again to the 2025 North Carolina Transportation Summit. And now, please welcome again our host for this year's summit, North Carolina Board of Transportation Chair, Tony Lathrop.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our final session of the 2025 NC Transportation Summit, Funding and Financial Planning Roundtable. I was going to stay for this no matter what, even if I wasn't teeing it off. I was finance chair for 8 years. This is near and dear to my heart. So it's my pleasure to be here with you all this afternoon and to host this discussion of the future of transportation and the funding and policy impacts that will help us achieve our goals. I want to again thank our summit co-hosts, NC Go and the NC Chamber of Commerce. Thank you all and your teams. And I want to thank our sponsors who have helped to make this event a success. And I want you all to join me, please, in giving them a round of applause. We could not do any of this without the sponsors. So if you would now, please join me in introducing our moderator for this session, Carly Swanson. She's the NCDOT Director of Innovative Project Delivery. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Lathrop, and good afternoon and welcome to the final session of the 2025 Transportation Summit, the Funding and Financial Planning Roundtable. As mentioned, I'm Carly Swanson, the Director of Innovative Delivery. Today's discussion unites leaders from both state and local governments in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Our panelists bring diverse perspectives and valuable real-world experience, including transportation engineering, policy, and finance. As a state, we are at a critical moment in transportation funding. During today's session, we will explore ways to allocate resources strategically, foster innovation, and collaborate to shape the future. Please join me in welcoming our panel. Our first panelist I'd like to welcome to the stage is North Carolina Senator Vickie Sawyer. She represents District 37 and is chair of the Senate Transportation Committee in the North Carolina General Assembly. Senator Sawyer has championed innovative long-term solutions to strengthen North Carolina's transportation system. She spearheaded NC10, a bipartisan group focused on transportation funding modernization, which achieved proven results by enhancing revenues through 4 distinct funding streams. We are excited to have her on the panel with us today. Please welcome Senator Sawyer. Next, I'd like to invite Jay Gillespie from the Georgia Department of Transportation to the stage. Jay is the Director of Alternative Finance at GDOT and leads financial support of public-private partnership procurements, analysis of project delivery options, financial planning for major projects, and support for state and P3 financing to deliver GDOT's multi-billion-dollar major capital program. With deep experience in infrastructure finance and planning, he brings insights from both the public and private sectors, including prior roles at Ernst & Young and AECOM. Welcome, Jay, and thanks for joining us. And let's welcome our next panelist to the stage, John Boylston. John is Chief Engineer for Project Delivery at the South Carolina Department of Transportation. With more than 15 years at South Carolina DOT, he oversees the offices of pre-construction, engineering support, environmental services, and right-of-way. He is also charged with development and delivery of transportation projects statewide in support of SCDOT's 10-year plan. John offers a deep expertise in infrastructure planning and delivery, and we look forward to hearing your insights during today's panel. John, welcome. And our fourth and final panelist I'd like to welcome to the stage is Councilman Ed Driggs. Councilman Driggs represents District 7 on the Charlotte City Council, where he serves on the Transportation Planning and Development Committee, as well as the Jobs and Economic Development Committee. Councilman Driggs brings a wealth of experience in finance, having advised corporate clients on strategic transactions and securities offerings. His commitment to Charlotte and advancing the city's mobility goals is evidenced through his work securing funding for roads and sidewalks, engaging with the North Carolina General Assembly, and implementing the recently adopted Unified Development Ordinance. Please join me in welcoming Councilman Ed Driggs. All right, first I'd like to thank you all for joining us here today, and I'd like to start the conversation with a broad question for the group. When you look at the future of transportation and how we fund it, what is top of mind for you right now in your role? And I'll start with you, Councilman Driggs.
Thank you. Well, your question itself states the issue, how we fund it. I believe we're in a critical situation now in terms of our capacity to fund essential projects. And that's at the state level. It was also true at the Charlotte level, but we're working on that. We'll talk about what we're doing there. The other thing I think about a lot is just different modalities of transportation. So we need to break away from traditional thinking about single occupancy cars and building more roads and come up with a planning process that, for one, diversifies the modes of mobility, and two, through our land use planning, as we do in Charlotte, create centers of activity so that people don't have to travel as far for everyday activity. So there are a couple of things that are on my mind.
Thank you for that perspective. Now, John, as you look at the future of transportation for South Carolina and DOT, what is top of mind for you as you look at transportation funding?
So in South Carolina, we are wrapping up our first current 10-year plan and are looking to the next 10-year plan. And things are very different now than they were even just 7 or 8 years ago. Our state, depending on the source you look at, we're either the first, second, or third fastest growing state in the country. So we're dealing with an influx of people and seeing congestion like we haven't seen before. So we've got to, the current 10-year plan was really a fix-it-first plan that addressed 30 years of deferred maintenance, but we're gonna have to pivot and really look at congestion in our more urban areas, and really, for us, a consistent recurring stream of funding is important. We have to go to the legislature every year to ask for additional funds for certain things, and really our goal, our House of Representatives has formed they call it the SCDOT Modernization Ad Hoc Committee. And so this happens about every 10 years, but they are looking at everything from our organization to how projects are funded. So we are going to be, we're trying to tell our positive story, and we're going to be asking for things like the ability to do P3s and CMGC. We're very limited in our forms of alternative delivery. And then it's been discussed earlier in this summit that EVs are not paying the same rate as fuel gas-powered cars, and that's really nibbling around the edges, but it's still another thing we're going to be looking at and focusing on as we move forward.
Thank you, John, for that perspective. Now, Jay, looking at Georgia, I know you all have done a lot of creative things to get some major projects delivered. What is top of mind for you as you look at the future for Georgia and funding transportation?
I mean, for us, it's really two things, and it's reauthorizing the federal transportation bill, and we've got 13 months to do it. Very important to us. We have some very large programs and projects. It's important to have that certainty of funding. I was in DC last week speaking with USDOT and FHWA officials about our input to that bill, and we do have a lot of input. So that is important. Second for us is just project cost. I mean, it's no secret that materials, labor costs, everything is extraordinarily more expensive. And this, for at least where I sit at GDOT, it leads back to our federal financing tools that we're able to use through the federal government, the TIFIA program, and the use of private activity bonds. And this leads right back to reauthorization. Support for the TIFIA program, increasing the existing ceiling on private activity bonds are essential to delivering our major projects. So those are the two things that we're really focused on.
All right, thank you, Jay. And Senator Sawyer, as you look at the state of North Carolina, future transportation funding, what is top of mind for you?
Two things, actually. One will be sustainability of the current funding that we have. And the second thing is, how do we grow that funding? You know, I was sitting here yesterday listening to both Virginia and information from Texas, and I see that, you know, of course, Texas has the most road lane miles, and we're second, and then Virginia's third, but we're bottom of those three states in funding. So my role as an appropriator in the North Carolina State Senate is to look for creative ways in way we can advance funding, but also as someone who is an Republican, you know, I'm sitting here talking about how do we increase funding. That also means that it would, through taxes, that's not a fun thing to say, right? I mean, that's very scary to think about increases in taxes, but I'm very grateful for our partners at the NCDOT who are looking at how they deliver projects in an easier, better way that's going to cost less and be on time. So that's a big cog in the wheel of what we need to do as we move forward, is to increase funding, but also to make sure that projects are delivered on time and on budget.
Thank you, Senator Sawyer. And I do want to go into a little bit deeper on all of the efforts that you've helped with transportation funding over the last few years. General Assembly's made moves in the last 10 plus years, strengthening transportation funding and financing tools available to the department. So looking back at the motor fuel DMV indexation in 2015, Build NC in 2018, but a significant step to reliable funding came from the sales tax that took place in 2022, which originated through your NC10 commission. Many states view the sales tax as revenue outside of transportation, even though transportation goods contribute to this. So if you can just walk us through how you were able to convince other lawmakers that this was good legislative policy.
Thank you so much. I think it was a voice of almost all North Carolinians in our fast-growing areas. We are a fast-growing state, just like our counterparts over here, and you hear from constituents the need for road construction. So I don't know that I had a magic bullet. I think that is a concerted voice of all North Carolinians that they need better roads, and they need them now. The one way to do that is through funding. Now, the secret and the sauce is that I had some great stakeholders, so although I get to come up here and brag about that what we did there, it really was a lot of stakeholders that were involved in that process. So I would be remiss if I didn't give a nod to them for helping us with that. And lastly, and another secret to the sauce or behind the curtain, is that we truly wanted to do it as a sales tax just on transportation goods. That was our idea, thinking that we could do that. And thankfully, the North Carolina Department of Revenue was not able to complete that. So we had a great, brilliant staffer who said, well, let's just go ahead and forget that portion of it and we'll just do a straight percentage. And so I would like to say that was my wisdom all along. It was not, and I was thankful for them not being able to actually compute that information, and it helped and has given the North Carolina Department of Transportation like $648 million more per year in the first year, and we continue to, hopefully that will grow as the state of North Carolina does.
Now, in addition to the sales tax, NC10 Commission also recommended raising the P3 slots, which did happen this session, going from 3 to 6. How important is it for North Carolina to take advantage of the P3 delivery tool?
Incredibly important if you don't want to be stuck in traffic. I mean, that's very simply easy said, right? Because the money just simply isn't there. I live in the Charlotte region. We were one of the first P3s. I live on that corridor. That's basically my front door is I-77 North. But we would still not have that project today, I believe, if we had not had that toll and that P3. So now that my community enjoys the convenience of a toll, I think all North Carolina communities should also share in that convenience of toll, because quite frankly, we cannot answer the call of what is needed right now to continue to live, work, and play in North Carolina in a comfortable way through transportation.
Thank you. And do you see the potential of expanding sales tax referendums statewide for other counties and cities? We're hearing of different areas looking at this as a potential transportation solution.
Absolutely. I have been completely behind that position since Mecklenburg County. I know Councilman Driggs has heard my cry many a times on this one, but I'm glad that Mecklenburg County is in this situation where they are able to do a sales tax referendum. My ask is I want a Murphy to Manio approach so that all the municipal governments can also get in ahead of this and help and work and partner with the DOT. Quite frankly, they're the ones who are making zoning and planning decisions. based on things that are happening out of Raleigh and promises that we have to make. I think it would be better if we could empower the locals to be able to not only have more control over their road construction, but marry that with the planning and zoning decisions that they make for their constituents.
Well, thank you for your perspective. Jay, next I want to turn it to you. Georgia's been a national leader in alternative delivery, and your work on the Major Mobility Investment Program, or the MMIP, several years ago is a key part of that story. Obviously, a lot of us know about SR 400, and the Express Lanes project is a standout P3, and it recently reached financial close. So let's talk a little bit about what made that deal work. Can you first describe the project scope and the final deal itself?
Yeah, thanks, Carly. The project scope is 16 center line miles of express lanes, 2 in either direction, on SR 400, which is in the northern part of the Atlanta metro region. The project includes, bridge upgrades, interchange upgrades, direct access points to the express lanes. It also includes a bus rapid transit system, which I think is the first in the Atlanta metro region. From the MARTA Heavy Rail Station at North Springs and then to points north with stations along the way, which was funded by a GEO bond issuance from the state of Georgia and also a contribution from our bidder. Tolling rates are dynamic. It is a managed lane. It's a DBFOM revenue risk delivery. The developer does take revenue risk. They operate tolling, obviously, and they provide O&M for both the express lanes and the general purpose lanes for 50 years following substantial completion, which is February 2031. So the final deal itself, bear with me, this is my nerdy financial person information that I'm giving. So we received 2 strong proposals, one from SR 400 Peach Partners, which is made up of Meridium, ACS, and Acciona, and then also a proposal from Centra, Ferrovial, TKO. We reached financial close back on August 5th, really a landmark deal, a $3.89 billion TIFIA loan, which is the largest TIFIA loan in US history, a $3.32 billion private activity bond issuance, which is the largest P3 bond deal in US history, probably the largest municipal issuance this year, and then also $3.35 billion of equity from the 3 bidders that were selected. So this funds a 5.5-year design and construction period. They also, as you probably know, the bidders provided a $3.8 billion concession fee to the state of Georgia. The state contributed about $100 million for the BRT system that I mentioned. The bidder providing $26 million as well. We also received an infra grant of $184 million back in 2018. The DNC price was higher, to my project cost point, was higher than we had anticipated. A lot of this was due to alternative technical concepts that the bidder had. And so this really drove traffic to the lanes, provided a lot more access points than we had in our original plans. So, helped the project in general, helped drive mobility for the project as well. We're obviously very excited about this procurement. Reaching financial close was quite a day. We were very excited. Receiving the concession fee as well was quite a day. But that wasn't our goal, receiving the largest concession fee. Our goal was really to deliver the project and do it in a way that it would provide certainty that it was going to be delivered. And these concession fee dollars are helpful not only because they allow projects in the surrounding corridor to be advanced, but there's an indirect effect of other projects in the state that can now move forward because of funding that's going to the projects around the SR 400 corridor. So very, very much a big win for us in Georgia. I can't say this enough. This really shows the benefit of the TIFIA loan program and the private activity bonds that USDOT provides to us. This lowered the cost of financing. We received a $4 billion allocation of private activity bonds. We didn't actually use the full allocation, but essential to delivering a project as large and with a financing as large as this.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and I know originally the project was planned as an availability or payment or AP model. What led to the pivot of revenue risk P3?
So we had a great procurement under the AP model. I think we were feeling good about where our proposals were going to come in. In the end, we received just one compliant bid, which was probably double what we had programmed for funding. With an availability payment model, you're effectively locking in the state to some very large payments for 35 years. And we just knew that that wasn't going to be sustainable. So we decided to end the procurement, took some time to think about next steps. With the project cost increasing that I mentioned, we thought about what's the next best option that we could have, and advancing the potential toll revenue from the project and delivering the project as a revenue risk deal made a whole lot of sense. And so that was, that's where we made the move to revenue risk. And it also kind of paved the way for the future with all of our program of projects, because originally they were all availability payment projects. Well, as project costs increase, those availability payments start to stack up and it becomes unsustainable. And our project pipeline, our robust pipeline that we're always talking about, would not happen if it's going to be availability payment delivery. We just don't have the funds, and too much would be dedicated to these large projects. So we feel good about our decision. We went from potentially paying hundreds of millions of dollars a year for 35 years to receiving the project at no upfront cost, and then also receiving the concession fee that I mentioned. So it's been a great outcome for Georgia.
And how critical would you say the broader express lane network in the Atlanta region was to securing private interest and reaching that successful close?
So the broader express lane network, I think we need to think about it as also the existing system that we have in Georgia, because we do have 4 operating facilities, managed lanes facilities in Georgia, and then the future facilities and what's to come next. So the existing facilities show that tolling works. We have widespread adoption. We have a lot of folks that have Peach Passes, which is our tolling tag in Georgia. They understand how the lanes work. They understand the benefit, the time benefits of these lanes. So when we go and speak to people about new projects, the reaction that we often get is, why haven't you already built this project? We want this now. So that is a great environment to be procuring new express lanes in, where demand is already there, adoption is easier, and the existing facilities show how they work. So, something we talk about often, I mentioned before, is our pipeline of projects. So these have been highway interchange reconstructions, capacity improvements, and then most importantly for SR 400, it's been the 285 corridor as well. So 285 East and 285 West. 285 East is a procurement that's currently happening right now for express lanes. The SR 400 project will plug into 285 East. We have a track record of delivery at GDOT that we're very proud of. We have very careful project planning and development. We have very strong leadership with my boss, Russell McMurray, who's always pushing us for more projects and faster. So this environment creates a lot of interest in Georgia. It shows the market that these aren't just projects that we have on the boards, that these are reality that are going to come soon. I have to acknowledge, though, the SR 400 project was financed on its own. So it needed to stand alone, and it did, and the financing is based on that. So a lot of work on traffic and revenue in the corridor. It is a higher income corridor, the SR 400 corridor. Forsyth County at the northern end of 400 is a very fast-growing county, so we had a lot of really good fundamentals that created, in reaction, strong proposals, and then led to a good financial close.
Great, thank you, Jay. Next, John, I want to turn to you in South Carolina. South Carolina has a history of utilizing sales tax for transportation. Horry County has its RIDE program, or the Road Improvement and Development Effort. Then York County has the Pennies for Progress. Richland County has its Transportation Penny, and that's just to name a few. How important have these initiatives been in building and maintaining the roads?
They've been incredibly important. The senator ranked the top 3 highway systems in the country, and a lot of people don't know that South Carolina is number 4. We also are about in the middle of the pack in terms of population, and we don't have economic kind of drivers like Atlanta or Charlotte that really impact the whole state. So we constantly find ourselves kind of under the gun in terms of funding. So these programs have been vitally important as a complement to what we're doing across the state. Currently, we have six counties that are levying sales tax. That number fluctuates a little depending on the outcomes of elections and things like that. But right now we have 6, and I would say 2 of the ones that you mentioned are really, I would consider our most mature and robust programs. And they are both, share a state line with North Carolina. The Horry County RIDE program is in its 4th iteration. Up until now, they have renewed their program or gone out to the voters every 7 years. This last year, they went out with a 25-year plan that will, over the course of their program, will accomplish $6.6 billion worth of projects. And so that's a huge boost to what's going on, especially down there in that part of the state where there's a lot of tourism. They are leveraging sales tax revenues, not just from their citizens, but all the folks that come to visit the Myrtle Beach and the Grand Strand area. And then the York Pennies for Progress is the oldest of our programs. It's, I shouldn't say our programs, the oldest of the sales tax programs. They are on their 5th go around, actually, just beginning it. And they have really done a good job. I don't know their numbers off the top of my head. And these are all efforts that are handled at the county level. They will often collaborate and coordinate with us on the front end and when they're selecting projects. They typically will draw from one of our metropolitan planning organizations, their long-range plans, also some input from the locals, but it's generally a complement to what we're doing because most of the work they're doing is on our system. So, they have been, and their projects run the full gamut from, the Horry County RIDE program has got several $100 million set aside for a future I-73 down to sidewalks and paving projects. So, yes, they've been really important to supplementing and complementing what we're doing at a state level.
And what would you say has contributed to the state's success with these programs, particularly when it comes to public support?
Yeah, I think the counties that have been successful have do a really good job of being intentional about the projects they pick and picking the right kind of projects. They are required when they put a referendum out to list the projects that they are going to work on. And the counties that are very precise and exact about the projects that they want to do tend to, at least from my view, they are the ones that are more successful. And a lot of it depends on the type of project too. I think generally the voters are going to want to see a congested road widened or a dangerous intersection fixed, anything related to safety or congestion. Drainage projects and add-ons like parks and things like that, generally I feel kind of dilute what they're really trying to do. And those often I feel like are negatives in the eyes of voters and can sometimes torpedo the efforts. A lot of it depends on the election cycle. We had just in 2024, there were several counties that had referendums on their ballots. Of course, that was a presidential election. And in some of our more, right-leaning counties, the voter turnout was really large, and those folks are typically not crazy about voting for taxes. And so we saw a couple of our counties that have had sales taxes in the past fail this time, and they are all actively working towards trying another referendum in 26 in an off year, or just having a special election in one of the odd years. But a lot of it has to do with the timing of it and what's going on statewide and nationally.
And are counties typically allocating funds to capital construction, or do some use these revenues for maintenance and operations?
You know, like I mentioned, the projects kind of run the gamut, and so they will have large widening corridor type projects, supplementing, you know, interstate projects, but they'll also have, most of them will have a resurfacing component to their projects. So, and that's a huge help to us. Again, trying to maintain over 40,000 miles of roadway. Any help we can get on our system is welcomed. And so, in advance of putting these programs together, they will come to us typically, and we'll sit down with them and show them kind of what our paving plan is over the next few years, and they will incorporate those projects into their resurfacing plans. So yeah, we do see some on the maintenance side, in addition to the larger corridor type projects. And I wanted, if I could go back a little bit, just in general, talking about these programs, they are handled differently from county to county. For instance, Horry County has asked us to basically deliver their major projects. We're really kind of acting as a consultant to them. So when we select a consultant to develop these projects, they sit on selection committees. But we are really, the DOT is developing these larger projects for Horry County. That's just the model they've chosen. It's the model that's worked for 15 years now, and it's if from a project deliveries perspective, I like that my program managers are getting to work on some big complex projects that they might not have had a chance to work on otherwise. The Pennies for Progress program is different. They kind of handle their own business. They hire consultants to develop their projects. Regardless of how the program is set up and operated, they're generally doing work on our system. So we will have intergovernmental agreements with them that lay out how we're going to work together. And in the York example, we are really just reviewing plans, making sure they meet our standards and criteria, and are something that we would, you know, basically say, yes, go build that. So I just wanted to add that. I didn't cover that in the first or second question.
And thank you for that perspective from South Carolina. I know there's a lot of interest here in North Carolina in looking at local sales tax initiatives, so thank you. Councilman Driggs, I want to turn this over to you now. You have been chairman of the Charlotte's Transportation Committee during a very impactful time. I read a stat the other day that said the Charlotte region itself encompasses, you know, nearly 3 million people. Obviously, there have been a lot of transportation infrastructure decisions that have been made this summer, have been debated over many years, and will have generational impacts. Can you first spend a few minutes talking about some of these decisions and the historic nature, first, of the Charlotte transportation referendum?
So it is historic. If you go back to 1998, Mecklenburg County voters approved a half-cent sales tax. And around that time, the MTC was created and a 2030 mobility plan was developed. That seemed like a long time in the future at that point. With the proceeds from the half-cent tax, we were able to build the Blue Line in 2 segments at a total cost of about $2 billion. But with that, the capacity of the half-cent was pretty much tapped out. So time went by, and we weren't doing too much, and then it became clear to us that we were going to have to do something big. It was going to take a bold initiative to meet the growing demands. The city was growing rapidly, and you could just observe on the roads the congestion. I think that's a problem we all deal with. So about 5 years ago, we had a task force convened of citizens and subject matter experts headed up by Harvey Gantt, and they kind of reviewed a lot of the thinking that had been going on in our planning department, in our mobility planning department, and came back with a recommendation. And they said, these are the things you can do, these rail lines and so on. And that included also a recommendation that it be funded with a sales tax. There had been some discussion of partly funding it with a property tax. That was not well received. So we took away from that the idea that it was going to have to be a sales tax. And then the time came to kind of move forward, to do something. And we ran up right away against a big obstacle, which was that the red line that was supposed to be funded by the half-cent sales tax hadn't been built. And that was because Norfolk Southern, who controlled the corridor along there, wasn't interested in allowing us to operate passenger rail. And the northern towns did not want to participate in a conversation at all if they didn't have assurances about the red line. So what our manager, Marcus Jones, did is said, let's buy it. And I remember sitting in his office going, how much does that cost, Marcus? And he said, 90 million. And I said, do we have 90 million? How do we do that? And essentially, the city then did, in the end, it bought the Mecklenburg portion of the corridor for 74 million and has an option on the Iredell County, portion. And it's sort of like a loan to against the future proceeds from the tax. So we did that, and with that, it was possible for all the members of the MTC, the 6 Mecklenburg towns, Charlotte, and the county, to start discussions about what this plan could look like. One thing that was clear was we would not be able to have a sales tax without a public referendum, and that was not going to be possible without legislation. So the managers of all of the communities focused on drafting what that legislation should look like. There were conversations with members of the legislature, including Senator Sawyer. And what we gleaned from those discussions, for one, was the legislature was not going to authorize a sales tax if 90% of the proceeds was going to be spent on rail projects. So there was kind of a difference in terms of perception as to where the priorities were. And therefore, what the towns then agreed was to submit a proposal that allocated 40% of the proceeds of the sales tax to rail, 20% for bus, and 40% for roads. And that then was what was contained in a document, along with a provision that the whole system would be controlled by an authority, and not, as had been the case, by CATS, which was an enterprise fund of the city of Charlotte. So having kind of worked that out and having drafted, the draft was then submitted to the legislature. And I want to mention here, it's a good idea if you want to approach the legislature, and Senator Sawyer, back me up on this, come in with a proposal, a solution. Like, write it down, work it out. Don't go in and say, hey, I have this problem, would you solve it for me? Or, hey, I need this. So we were very clear. And as a result of a dialogue, we were able to submit an actual draft of a bill. And that then became the discussion topic among legislators. And clearly, there were a bunch of reasons why that was not easy. We weren't sure how it was going to go. Very grateful to Senator Sawyer and Rabin and Craven for sponsoring the bill and getting this ball rolling, and subsequently to Representative Tricia Cotham, who was a real champion in the House. The result, though, was extraordinary and historic, because that bill, that draft bill, had been supported by about 55 of the 60 elected officials in the towns in Mecklenburg County. A remarkable display of unity. And then in the legislature, finally, thanks to strong leadership, it was approved by about 140, over 140 members of both chambers, with only about 8 or 10 in opposition. Bipartisan, rural, urban. So I think it marks a sort of landmark in terms of how these things can get done. The appeal of it was that Mecklenburg County was basically offering to pay for its road improvements itself. The state recognized that the economic health of Mecklenburg County and Charlotte was pretty important to North Carolina, and I think that's why we were all able to come together around that. So the status right now is a referendum is scheduled in November, and there is a lot of active discussion going on in Mecklenburg County about whether or not the public will approve it. We've heard that some of these don't get approved. I believe we have a strong case here, and it consists of traffic jams. This is not an intellectual exercise. A lot of people are tired of sitting in their cars, and I'm very hopeful that it will get approved.
Before I move on to
I-77, yes.
I will move on to I-77 in just a moment. I did want to offer up, Senator Sawyer, was there anything, I know you talked about the importance of working with the legislature, anything you wanted to add to from that perspective?
No, I think Councilman has accurately displayed exactly what happened. And I do want to double down on this conversation is if you come with us to the legislature asking us to solve your problem, I'm sure you're not going to like the answer. It's much better for you to solve your own problems and then come with us to the solution, because it is very hard to make legislation pass. And as you can imagine, if you don't have a unified front at home, you'll have a divided front in the legislature.
Thank you. So next, I-77, we worked very closely in the working group in joint with CRTPO over the course of several months. But just for the audience's awareness, the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization, or CRTPO, did decide to move forward with the P3 delivery for the I-77 South Express Lanes project. And there are several people in this room that are interested in the decision-making process for moving forward in this way. To put it into proper context, the MPO first identified this project in 2007, well before your time on the board. And with that said, the discussion has been ongoing for nearly 2 decades. And after years of local engagement, we got to an RFQ on the project just a couple weeks ago on August 15th. Can you help the audience better understand what was important to the MPO, what were some of the concerns, and the role that the working group played in this process?
So this is kind of a fun story. That project was in the STIP in 2017, I think. And then, but the costs kept spiraling, and therefore we weren't able to move ahead with it. We were up against a corridor cap, and it became pretty clear that it wasn't going to work as a state-funded project. But we did have some great meetings at the CRTPO where Brett Knipe, our brilliant Division 10 engineer at the time, since promoted, said to us, okay, we're going to evaluate the state-funded option versus the P3. And the P3 was controversial because the P3 that we did on the northern portion, to which the senator alluded, had raised a lot of unrest and may have actually affected, there were people who were really unhappy with it for different reasons. So we were approaching the subject of a P3 on the southern portion of I-77 with caution. But so Mr. Knipe said, you can do this P3, this radioactive thing, or you can do the state-funded option, in which case you will never have a road. You guys decide. And the idea, I think, was to involve the CRTPO in this decision so that it was clear that there had been involvement by elected officials in the choices we made. The decision was made then, yes, let's go with the P3, let's look at the thing that can work. And a working group of members of the CRTPO board was stood up, of which I was a member, to kind of go into more detail about what the body's requirements would be for a P3. And we were looking ahead to the prospect of issuing an RFQ and engaging with bidders. We had concerns from the I-77 North project that, for example, there had been, I think, 4 expressions of interest by bidders, but only 1 bid actually showed up. And that relates, I think, to what we just heard. And so it ended up being Sintra. A lot of people were worried that Sintra would somehow have a lock on this new thing, and that a lot of the experience that we had had before would be repeated. And I'm not holding Sintra responsible for that experience. I'm just saying there were some people who thought that in order to avoid the experience that we had had on I-77 North, we ought to exclude Sintra, which was not my position. But in any case, the working group then went down, line by line. And Carly, you were such a great help, all right? I want to recognize that here. But we went through item by item, and we identified high priorities and low priority issues. One of the big ones was that on I-77 North, the way it has evolved, there is usually a lot of congestion in the free lanes and then very light traffic in the managed lanes. And if you know how this works, you've got lanes that are available the same as they were before, and then drivers have the option to pay in order to go into those managed lanes and have an assurance of achieving speeds of at least 45 miles an hour. Well, in fact, the speeds you could achieve in those managed lanes were more like 90 miles an hour. I mean, there was just nothing there. And that, of course, meant that we were not achieving our purpose of alleviating traffic in the free lanes and also paying for the new lanes. That became a big focus of conversation. The question of the whole bidding process, What we learned was that a lot has happened since that project originated in terms of the technology of finance in this area. And therefore, as our consultant, Greg Boulanger, has pointed out to us, and also NCDOT, we are seeing a lot more possibilities and a much higher level of interest on the part of potential P3 partners in this. And so at the end of the working group process, we then went to the full CRTBO board and we said, these are the instructions that we want to give to NCDOT. They then, acting on those instructions, created an RFQ, and that in fact went out 2 weeks ago. And therefore we're now waiting with interest to see what kind of possibilities there are for the I-77 North thing. The last thing I'll mention about it was I-77 North was a 26-mile corridor that cost $900 million. I-77 South is an 11-mile corridor, and the last estimate we got on the cost of that was $3.2 billion. It's a more difficult corridor, but also the price escalation has been incredible.
Yeah, as we've talked about, since it was first submitted in the STIP back in 2014, the cost of the project's tripled. So,
yes.
In that time, in 10 years, it's now our state's most expensive transportation project. You were very helpful. We enjoyed working with the working group and the local stakeholders. I did want to ask, for another planning organization that might be looking at tolling or a P3 for the first time, from your perspective and your experience with I-77 South, what advice do you have?
I think you need to go through a process like we did of being sure that you're clear on what your choices are. In our case, it was pretty clear-cut in the end. But you may find, given the state funding environment and so on, that this is a possibility and there aren't any others. In which case, you then have to learn from our experience and the experience of others, and there have been a number of major projects, including one underway in Georgia, and study those, learn from them, and be guided by some of the provisions in them. And they're not all the same, but there are the possibility, for example, of getting paid money up front in some of these agreements. The risk allocation can vary. So educate yourselves, I think, and be sure that this is what you're going to do. One interesting thing about our I-77 project is 40% of the revenue will come from out of state, from through traffic, including from South Carolina. That is a kind of relief, I guess, to people in Mecklenburg who are being assured, look, you're not going to pay for all of this. This has benefits for other people, and they will participate in the cost.
Thank you for that perspective. And Jay, your example with SR 400 is a great example of a major P3 project, now underway. Any lessons learned? As mentioned earlier, we're on our second P3, state's most expensive project. We're in active procurement right now. Any piece of advice from your experience with SR 400 you'd like to share with the group?
Well, we also looked at I-77, just to look at other precedents. We procured SR 400 twice. We did an availability payment procurement, and then we did a revenue risk procurement. I don't recommend that. We learned a lot along the way. I think I was previously a consultant to GDOT for 12 years. I helped plan the initial major mobility investment program. And so there has been a pretty dramatic evolution of the DOT from kind of the way things had been in the past when projects were smaller and P3 delivery wasn't as prevalent. And then getting our feet wet with some design build finance projects over time, some interchange reconstructions. And I think we also very much lean heavily on our advisors. It's no secret that they work around the country. They have a lot of good lessons learned and precedent knowledge that we definitely lean on. I think we wanted to be flexible in SR 400. That was very important to us. We listened. I think all of the bidders will admit this, or will tell you this, that we tried to listen and try to understand. We evolved our risk positions a lot. I think we're now stuck with those risk positions because that's kind of where the industry has gone. But we get a lot of compliments for that because I think it gave certainty. It allowed bidders to be aggressive and really produce a great outcome. But yeah, the old saying, if you've done one P3, you've done one P3. That's true. And so every project has its own challenges, but it's a journey. And, we're watching what's happening in Tennessee with their project, obviously I-77 here in North Carolina, and, we're hoping for good outcomes all around. So.
Thank you. Yeah, now I'd like to ask a question for the group. I'll start with you, Senator Sawyer. If you could change one thing about how we currently fund or plan transportation infrastructure, whether at the local, state, or federal levels, what would it be and why?
Thank you for the opportunity to say this. Can I get two? You give me two? Okay, thanks. The first one, I think I have a shared unity with the NCDOT, and that is working better with our partners to move utilities. I know this is kind of like just basic concrete information, but guys and folks who are in the field will tell you constantly that there's always that back and forth struggle. And what can I do as a legislator to enhance state law so that we can give the department the ability to go ahead and uniformly move those utilities at the time of construction, really looking at other states that already have done that and to employ that. So I'm doing a plug for the short session, guys, and I'm sure a bunch of utility contractors will be at my door pretty soon, but I think it's a conversation that we need to continue to have and something that we can help as legislators to help the agency partner with those groups to streamline construction on roads. My second thing is something that actual Councilman Driggs helped me with, and he came up and we met him. He's a busy guy, as you can tell, and we really worked on how can we empower local municipalities to advance construction, some of their projects in the STEP. These, again, are the men and women who are sitting in front of their neighbors making decisions on housing. And if you live in my area or any area around growing fast urban centers in North Carolina, there is an anti-growth sentiment. And it's very hard to get the housing that we so desperately need for all of these folks who are moving to North Carolina with a affordable component to it, because you have such political resistance about housing and construction. And it really isn't that they don't want other people in their neighborhood, they just don't want them on their roads, because most of these folks are seriously sitting in congestion. So how do we better align the state and the local through a funding working relationship with them, and also bring in that private market? So if you want to have some fun reading tonight, you can go see Councilman Driggs and my bill that we worked on, and it met a buzzsaw real quick, but I'm continuing to figure out where that gremlin is so we can move forward. But I do think we should, at the state level, allow those who are making those decisions on zoning and planning to have more of a role in also working with the road construction.
Thank you for that. Councilman Driggs, was there anything you wanted to add to Senator Sawyer?
No, I'll respond to this question in my turn, but thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
Next, I'll turn it over to John. From your experience, if you could change one thing about how we currently fund or plan transportation infrastructure, whether it's at local, state, federal level, what would it be and why?
In South Carolina, we're a little bit, we need more tools in the toolbox. We're a little bit hamstrung right now. All we can do in terms of alternative delivery is design build. So there's been a lot of discussion about P3s and other forms of delivery. So I would say from a delivery kind of finance side, it would be adding tools to our toolbox, which is going to require the legislature to pass laws that will allow that. On the planning and also a little bit delivery side too, this was discussed a lot yesterday in the reauthorization session, but we really, we need recurring, reliable streams of funding that we can depend on. Otherwise, it's just incredibly difficult to plan these projects. And to the senator's point, administrative hurdles, and in addition to the utility and right-of-way delays, there was some discussion about NEPA assignment. We are pursuing that in South Carolina and are hopeful that that's going to shave some time off of our project delivery and help us in planning projects for the future.
Thank you for that. And Jay, looking at Georgia and looking at how we plan and fund transportation, or what would you say, whether at the local, state, or federal level, if you could change one thing, what would it be from Georgia's perspective?
I mean, I think it's really remaking the Highway Trust Fund for the future. Right now we have general fund transfers to make up some slack because we spend too much money. and it's time to balance revenues and expenditures. Does that mean that there's a federal gas tax increase that it's going to be difficult to vote for? Probably so, but I think there's a lot of different tools that need to be deployed to make it sustainable. To John's point, maybe that's indexing to inflation. Maybe that's looking at a federal EV fee as well, or maybe a VMT type tax. States are now having to, and we have done it in Georgia, to try to pick up the slack, from what we may not receive. And that's, in Georgia in 2015, we passed HB 170, which reorganized our gas tax, which meant about $1 billion of additional funding to the DOT each year, which was transformative. And that is where the major mobility investment program came from, because we had certainty to rely on those revenues. We also passed in 2012 the TIA, which is the Transportation, I'm going to mess this up, but Investment Act, I believe, which allows certain regions around the state to tax themselves, 1% sales tax, to deliver projects in their region. And so folks, they vote, they see the projects that are being delivered, and it's been very impactful. So, states have had to pick up slack where potentially, funding from the federal government, from the Highway Trust Fund may not be there, so.
Thank you. And Councilman Driggs, as you're looking from City of Charlotte perspective, if you could change one thing on how we currently fund our planned transportation infrastructure, local, state, federal level, what would it be and why?
So, well, for one, we are, right? We're working on the P3 for I-77, and we are going to have a referendum in November on a local sales tax. I think if I would change anything, it would be to come up with a new approach to how we fund mobility. I think we're sort of mired. We saw the gas tax go down, and then a lot of the traditional tools were examined to see whether that decline could be compensated. But in fact, if we recognize, in Charlotte, for example, mobility is the oil that keeps the machine going. Everybody benefits from that. And so the idea that maybe we should tie our revenue to users doesn't take into account all the ways in which other people benefit. If I drive to visit my brother, I hope he's happy to see me, and he benefited from the fact that there was a road that I could drive on. Or if goods are delivered on highways and people are able to have access to merchandise at lower prices because there was that possibility. So in that sense, we may have to expand the scope of ways that we think about to fund it. And by the way, I'm a Republican, so like Senator Sawyer, I'm in a strange position being a champion for the sales tax in Mecklenburg County. But my feeling is there are certain things that people expect government to do, and they cost money. And as elected officials, we have to have the courage to make people understand, I can get that for you, but it does cost money. And I think too often politicians campaign on the suggestion, hey, I can do this for you, and it will be painless. It's not painless. But on the other hand, you get too far behind, and then it costs more, and meanwhile, you've got a really unhappy situation. The other thing I will mention, too, is this evolution in terms of what people understand under mobility. Used to be it was transportation, and that was kind of cars and buses. So now we see that millennials and others don't want to own cars, and certainly in Charlotte, there's a lot of emphasis on greenways and safe bike paths and the bus system. One of the things that we will do with the proceeds from the sales tax, if it's approved, is put benches and shelters at every single bus station in our system. And incredibly, those exist. One of those exists only in about 30 or 40% of all of our bus stops. Otherwise, you're standing by the edge of the road waiting for a bus. So we have to make the experience more agreeable. And I will just mention, too, I think in the country and for us in Charlotte, the issue of safety. We had some high-profile crimes that were committed on our transportation system, and people are now very focused on what we are doing to make sure that they can travel safely. So that's going to need to be a dimension as we try to get away from the inefficient model of single-occupant vehicles. We have to make it appealing and safe for people to travel by other means.
Thank you for that perspective. And it looks like we have time for one more question. Another question I'll pose to the group. We've talked a lot today about collaboration and creativity to get major transportation projects move forward, whether it's through the use of a P3, a local sales tax. So my question for the group, as you look towards the future in your city, in your states, what are the biggest transportation infrastructure challenges you see, and how are different levels of government going to collaborate to address them? So I'll start with you, Senator Sawyer.
Oh, good. Well, thank you for that opportunity to go first. I don't know that I'm enjoying it. No, I kid, but very similar to what we've already said, so I won't rehash most of that. But for me, my focus in my service to the state of North Carolina has and always will be about modernizing transportation funding. And you can't do anything without money. And this is a very simple, basic tenet of your own life, right? If you don't have money in your checking account, then you can't go buy those new pair of shoes that you want. So how in the world, if we don't have money in the state coffers to build the construction, then we're not going to be able to answer the needs that are there. So as we continue to move forward, for me, it is still going to be the sustainability of funding, increasing that funding, and how we continue to invest in North Carolina, because I do genuinely believe we are the best state in the union.
Thank you.
I want to make it that way and continue it to be that way.
Jay, as you look at the future in Georgia, what are those top of mind infrastructure challenges, and what is it going to take for both local and state to work together to address them?
I mean, the top challenges are always safety is first. I mean, that is one big thing that we're always pushing at the DOT. Obviously, freight movement is a timely topic. The Port of Savannah is one of the fastest growing ports in the nation. And all of the roads and different modes of transportation out of the port are very important, and making ways to get that cargo efficiently to distribution centers and elsewhere. Reducing congestion, that comes from our P3 program in the metro area, because most of the congestion is in the metro Atlanta area. We had, back in 2007, our board passed a resolution saying that if there is additional interstate capacity on limited access corridors, it must be managed. So just expanding general purpose lanes and then they fill up the next day and you wonder what you spent your money on isn't gonna work. And so managed lanes are the wave of the future for us. Atlanta is a bit of a economic development juggernaut. I mean, it was a crossroads and transportation led to that. It was a crossroads of two major rail lines. Some very smart people decided to put a big airport there. The Port of Savannah, as I mentioned, has been an incredible growth story. And those investments and those economic development success stories were because people made decisions, and they were hard decisions at the time, to spend money and to build transportation infrastructure to now support a city the size of Atlanta and a metro area the size of Atlanta. So finding ways to invest in projects that continue that story. We're always trying to outdo what we did last time. We have new corporations, new industries moving to Georgia, electric vehicle industry, battery industry. We got to keep going, and finding those important investments is key. How we do that, I'm going to leave that to the elected officials on the stage. That's not my area. So.
Thank you, Jay. And John, South Carolina, what's top of mind for you in terms of transportation infrastructure challenges, and what do you see are the ways that the local and state governments can work together and collaborate to solve them?
Yeah, I think really that's the key, is the working together part. The senator touched on it a little bit. Is our local planning and zoning boards, we really don't have any communication with them, and they can approve a new subdivision without the DOT really knowing about it. And of course, everyone knows how that impacts our roadways. And we've laid out a 10-year plan that is focused on things like bridges and interstates and safety and paving projects. We don't have a whole lot of corridor projects, but especially we're seeing in areas right outside of the greater Charlotte area, in places like Fort Mill and Indian Land and Lancaster County, there's going to need to be some widenings that are happening there. And that's where these penny programs come into play a lot, but they also are going to have to be delivered by the state at some point. And so some discussion between the local planning organizations about what they're approving and kind of educating them on what the impacts are of what they're approving is going to be a big challenge for us. And then, Jay touched on congestion. Our port in Charleston is the deepest port on the East Coast, and right now they handle 3 million containers a year, but over the next 20 years, they're looking to expand that capacity to 10 million containers a year. Now, some of that will leave the port on rail, but there will be a significant impact on Charleston and the rest of the state. We've got a $7 billion project on I-526 around Charleston that we are in the very early stages of, and we've got about $7 billion worth of work under contract right now. So that project alone would double that, and so we're going to have to look at other ways to fund and deliver that project.
Thank you. And to add to John a little bit, I know just a couple months ago we had a peer exchange between North Carolina and South Carolina DOTs. It was a great meeting for us to have, but can you talk to us a little bit too about how important it is for our neighboring states to continue the collaboration? We've got some major projects along the state line, and it's important for us to be on the same page.
Absolutely. There's been a lot of talk about I-77, and that's obviously not something you can just chop off at the state line. We're going to have to be involved in that. In some way, and there's the Carolina Bays Parkway in Horry County that goes over into Brunswick County in North Carolina. So in addition to just the working together on actual projects, I think the relationships that we have with the North Carolina DOT I think are very strong, and I know our secretary and Rob can call Joey and Chris at any time they need something. And I think that those relationships and those working partnerships are vitally important.
Thank you, and we appreciate the partnership too. Sure. Turning to you, Councilman Driggs, as you're looking towards the future, I know we've, state, local governments, we've worked on a lot of challenges, been able to get projects move forward, but as you're looking towards the future, what's top of mind for you in terms of transportation infrastructure challenges? What's it going to take for the local and state governments to solve those?
So if I had to highlight one challenge, it would be housing. And I say that because in Charlotte, we're working against a steep rise in the cost of housing. And the answer that's proposed for that is you need to increase density. You need to create more housing. So great, we wrote our UDO. It has a more permissive policy in terms of the kind of density that you can build, but then that puts more traffic on the road. So this mobility initiative is intended to try to harmonize the investment that we're making in infrastructure with the growth in the housing stock that we're trying to achieve. In terms of collaboration, we've just had a wonderful experience, both in the county, the towns working together after a long period in which there was a bit of a chill with the northern towns because they didn't want to talk unless we solved the problem. And I think they were kind of moved by the fact that Charlotte said, fine, we'll buy it, can we talk? And then in the legislature, and what I experienced the whole time was how critical it is to make this personal, to get to know the people who matter. And you establish a conversation, you gain an understanding of what they're up against. So when I talked to Senator Sawyer early on, she was, if you don't mind me saying, in kind of a tough spot because the environment that she was in had a lot of people who, because they were anti-tax or they're from other parts of the state, I really give her a lot of credit for finding a way, along with her two sponsors. Dave Craven was very active in a path forward. But I think it was necessary to get acquainted, right? And I didn't walk into her office and say, here's my draft, please do this for me. And I did spend a lot of time going back, I think 3 or 4 years, depending on when you count, visiting the leadership, various members, the key people, and not having those first conversations about the thing I'm trying to do, but just saying, I'm here, I'm from Charlotte, this is what we are working on, and we look forward to cooperating with you and to hearing your thoughts about how this can be done. So I think that personal thing was something that I experienced in our recent big initiatives and recommend to everybody. They're busy people, right? It's hard to get an appointment, but take every opportunity you can to get that relationship you have with some of the people you need to a personal level. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's all the time we have for today. I first want to give our panelists a hand for a great discussion. Thank you all for your thoughtful contributions and adding to our discussion. And as we look ahead, it's clear that innovation and collaboration and leadership at both the state and local levels have to be the foundation of how we finance and deliver transportation across the Southeast. Now, please join me in welcoming Deputy Secretary and General Counsel Daniel Johnson to the stage to deliver the closing remarks for this year's summit.
Thank you, Carly, and thanks to all the members of the panel for taking time out of what I'm sure are very busy schedules to share your perspectives from your experience on the future of transportation and how we fund that future of transportation. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to come to this Transportation Summit. In closing out the 2025 North Carolina Transportation Summit, I want to thank all of you for your dedication to transportation in North Carolina. Over the past 2 days, we've discussed innovation, resilience, and collaboration in North Carolina's transportation future. We explored crisis management and emergency operations and considered how peer states balance risk and foresight in public-private partnerships. We then delved into cutting-edge applications of artificial intelligence to enhance operations, as well as stakeholder engagement, along with many other topics. Probably my only regret for the past 2 days is that I haven't been able to attend more of these sessions. I hope you all found those topics engaging and were able to engage with each other and truly gain from this experience. We've got an amazing collection of people from all aspects of the transportation industry. I hope you had a chance to network, to spark new collaboration, to speak to people you've known for many years. I hope you walk away from this summit with new relationships that you can build on and new ideas that we can implement. It's critical that all our input is represented as we navigate important decisions about the future of transportation in our state. Our collaboration can set North Carolina up in a strong position for decades to come. On behalf of the department, I want to thank all of our sponsors and exhibitors. This event would not be possible without your support. Special thanks to our co-hosts, NCGO and the North Carolina Chamber. Thank you to all of our speakers, our board members, and our staff who put this event together. The staff's been working on this tirelessly for many months, and I think you see the fruits of their labor. And finally, thank you to our many partners for attending. Your support for transportation in North Carolina is critical, and we look forward to continuing to partner with you in the future. Please travel safely. Thank you.